Alright, welcome to the what is going to be a small video series of what I'm going to do about PokeMMO Doubles, which is basically going through every relevant doubles Pokemon, so a Pokemon with over 4.38 usage, and basically analyze them. So I'm going to explain why each Pokemon is good. I'm also going to explain what challenges does every Pokemon face, and then show some suggested builds for each Pokemon, and then demonstrate possible team support and counterplay for each Pokemon. And basically the purpose of this video series is to allow you to become a better team builder at the PokeMMO Doubles metagame. So yeah, now we got that out of the way, let's start with the first mon, which is going to be Tyranitar, which was the number one used Pokemon, well, actually has been for a good while in doubles metagame, and on December 2021 it had the usage of 30.71%, which is well, no small feat. Alright, well, then to start with, what actually makes Tyranitar good in PokeMMO Doubles? Well, I would argue the biggest reason why Tyranitar is everywhere is that it has the ability Sandstream, which make it a great counter weather for a lot of opposing weather teams. So, for example, rain is very strong in PokeMMO Doubles. So, having Sandstream to take away the Swift Swim speed boost as well as the added damage from the water type attacks, it's very useful to basically revert the weather and bringing Tyranitar, so your other Pokemon don't get outsped by Swift Swimmers. Then in addition, Tyranitar is very much a hard counter to Torkoal, and it reduces its power by a lot. And Tyranitar itself kind of hard counters Torkoal very hard. It doesn't take a lot of damage from Eruption. It's the sand is starting to chip away Torkoal's HP. And then simply it cannot use its solar beam. Earth power doesn't do much. Even super power, which is a one option Torkoal has, is not going to do a lot if Tyranitar has Chople Berry. So it's very much a hard counter for Torkoal. And it also reduces the accuracy from Blizzard spammers such as Bulmasnow and Vanilluxe. And not only being a good counter weather, then Tyranitar is also a very relevant counter for a lot of very good Pokemon in doubles, such as Chandelure, Renickles, Crobat, Togekiss, and Salamence. So basically Tyranitar is very good against all of these Pokemon with their standard sets. Only issue maybe might be Renickles in Trick Room with Focus Blast, but in general, it's still Tyranitar is like a great way to keep Renickles from running over teams. And then, kind of stating the obvious, but Tyranitar is what's called a pseudo legendary, which means it has a base stat total of 600, which is the highest basically of any non-legendary, which is insane. And the distribution of the stats for Tyranitar is, in terms of doubles, it's very good. It has great coverage, so I'm about to show the main set in a bit, but even though it uses kind of one set for the most part, it does have a lot of coverage options, and it can basically hit anything it wants, which is no small feat for already great mon as a Tyranitar. And then lastly, we like to basically meme about Rock Slide and how powerful it's in doubles, but like if you get Tyranitar in proper speed control to hit before its opponents, not only does it do a lot of damage, but it also has about 50% chance to flinch one of those two Pokemon, which is, I mean, it's a very powerful tool in doubles. Well, then on the counter side, what challenges Tyranitar faces? My face is a little bit over, just hold on. But yeah, what challenges does Tyranitar face? Well, it has defensively lots of weaknesses. It's weak to very many common offensive types such as water, ground, fighting, and so on. So it is actually threatened by a lot of things from the opposing side quite often. Then it's also very prone to intimidate, especially it's very much hard countered by Hitmontop. Um, then a lot, like I said, a large part of the doubles Pokemon carry some kind of a super effective move on Tyranitar. And then lastly, even though Tyranitar is used as a counter weather, then it's still kind of chipped very heavily whenever it comes in against, for example, Rain Cores or a Bulmasnow. Like it has to take a lot of damage each time it's doing it, like because Tyranitar is defensively weak to both Rain Sweepers and a Bulmasnow, for example. So it's going to take a lot of damage for its effort to basically revert the weather, which is it's kind of a problem in a sense, but yeah. Well, then to look at the builds of a Tyranitar, firstly to look at the nature and EVs. Well, even though it's actually quite hard to one-hit KO Tyranitar by like anything, it still has the kind of a KO or get KO'd syndrome. So basically, if Tyranitar doesn't take its opponent down while attacking, it's most likely going to face a very strong attack. So this is why I would argue that plus attack is generally the correct way to play Tyranitar. Then the main issue to think about is like in what kind of speed control do you want to play Tyranitar in? A very common way is to play Tyranitar in a Tailwind team, for example with Crobat, because they team up together really well. For example, Crobat takes care of Mienshao and Hitmontop. So when played as a Tailwind user, then it's very common to speed invest Tyranitar a little. For example, with 44 speed EVs, it outspeeds Mienshao in Tailwind, which allows it to basically do a lot of damage with Superpower, for example. So it can basically flip tables in Tailwind. Also, well, the rest of the EVs is basically maximizing attack and then rest putting on bulk to allow Tyranitar to hit as much as possible. Then other benchmark I kind of put here is to outspeed Gengar in Tailwind, which is also very useful thing to have. With 68 speed EVs you can do that, but Gengar is not being very popular right now, so you can kind of think for yourself if that's a worthy thing to have. But yeah. Also, just straight up not investing speed at all is not a bad option, but I just put a couple of speed benchmarks that might be reasonable to consider. And then if you play Tyranitar in like a Trick Room oriented team, then a simple max HP, max attack, and for special defenses with a 0 speed IV is just a very simple and effective way to play a Trick Room Tyranitar. And then lastly, one option that is kind of underutilized in my opinion is Jolly Scarf Tyranitar, which is not played a lot, mostly because it's very defensively prone. Like you basically want to have Protect on T-Tar, but it's offensively quite pressurizing. So if you basically outspeed your opponents and spam Rock Slide, then can be, I mean, can be very strong. But I guess it's mostly not used because Tyranitar is basically used as a defensive counter weather currently. Alright, well then about the moves. So what I would argue that the 3 must moves a standard Tyranitar should have are Rock Slide, Crunch, and Protect. So yeah, Rock Slide is a very powerful stab move which attacks both opponents, and if it attacks before its opponent basically, it has a 30% chance to flinch its target, and when you combine those odds together, it's around 50% chance to flinch one of those 2 Pokemon. So that's why I would always argue you should use Rock Slide over Stone Edge, even when its single target power isn't as good. Then Crunch is a very natural second move. It's the other stab, and it does like the most neutral damage on a single target, and it deals with Renickles, for example, or Chandelure. I mean, it can also be Rock Slided, I guess, but yeah, mostly Ghost and Ghost types like Dusclops also is taking a lot of damage from Crunch. So I think Crunch is kind of a no-brainer for that reason alone. Then, because Tyranitar faces a lot of pressure from opposing attacks, I would argue that Protect is a must to basically reposition your team to allow to either get proper speed control or redirection or some kind of a way to basically save your Tyranitar. Um, then last move is kind of up to for debate. The most common option so far has been Superpower to basically hit mainly opposing Tyranitars as well as Porygon 2s and that kinds of things. But you can also think about a fire move as the last move. For example, Fire Punch or Flamethrower. There are great ways to punish like a Scizor or Metagross or Ferrothorn, in which you otherwise can't do so much damage with your main stabs. Then about items, well, the Chapel Berry is the most common item to basically mitigate Tyranitar's main weakness to fighting. But if you want more offensive Tyranitar, then Life Orb is the most common way to play it. And then I also added Leftovers, which I think is kind of underutilized because Tyranitar spends a lot of time protecting, as weird as it sounds. So you can basically use those protect turns to kind of gain HP because you need to keep that Tyranitar alive. But in most cases, I would still probably recommend Chapel, even for defensive Tyranitar, or like a Tyranitar that wants to be preserve itself. But I still think it's an interesting option. But yeah, then the team synergy about Tyranitar is that Tyranitar can be slapped to basically all kinds of teams. Like kind of a boring answer, but that's how it really is. Like you can just have any kind of team, and if it struggles with weather, just slap a Tyranitar and you're fine. So it fits a lots of kinds of team, which is the reason why it's like 30% usage, which is insane. But if you want to have like more dedicated like team support, then you can use Excadrill, for example, to make use of the Sandstream. And then I also recommend to not have that many Pokemon that care about Intimidate. So if you have multiple Pokemon in addition to Tyranitar that are bothered by Intimidate, then when the Hinmontomp comes in, that's gonna take so much momentum from you. So I recommend to not have too many mons that are troubled by Intimidate. And then having some kind of a fighting type switching is also useful because a lot of times against like a close combat, you just have to switch out. So it's good to have like something that it's either immune or resists fighting attacks hard. I prod Crobat as a one example, which I very much like, because it provides a way to beat fighting types and have a tailwind option. But also you can have something like Renickles, which also is a good switch into fighting types. So, and it can also Renickles Tyranitar is also a very strong core, which together they kind of beat each other's counters. So that's a very strong core. And then lastly, to talk about the counterplay to Tyranitar. Well, I lifted Hitmontop as the number one because it is by far the main and the best way to keep Tyranitar in check. In some extent, you can also use Hariyama and Conkeldurr to counter Tyranitar, especially, well, Hariyama needs Trick Room to basically be a counter, but Conkeldurr is also a very interesting option with Mach Punch to threaten Tyranitar in any kinds of speed control. Then you have Scizor, which also makes use of a priority move to pressurize Tyranitar. Then you also have Metagross and Garchomp, which basically take less damage from Tyranitar and they do more damage on it. So those are good switch-ins to Tyranitar's main attacks, while they can really pressure Tyranitar back. So I would say these are the main ways to, like, if you need like a single way to basically, if you're thinking about like a single Pokemon in your team to improve your Tyranitar matchup, I would probably consider one of these Pokemon initially. But yeah, that's about it. That's my first episode about Tyranitar. I will next go through Hitmontop. So yeah, but thanks for watching and thanks for sticking to this series. Hopefully it will be enjoyable, and see you in the next one.